In today's video, I'll be going over SAT Practice Test 4, in which I'll be going over every math question from Math Module 1 without the use of a calculator. So make sure to stay until the end of the video.
Problem 1. If x equals 7, what is the value of x plus 20? Well, we know that x is 7, so x is 7. So now, what is 7 plus 20? Well, that's 27. So it's C. Problem 2. The lists give the values in datasets x and y. Which statement correctly compares the mean of dataset x and the mean of dataset y? So we are trying to compare the mean of these two datasets. So first of all, what is a mean? Well, a mean is just a mathematical term of saying the average. And now, how do we find the average? Well, the average is just the sum of all numbers divided by the number of numbers. But in this question, we actually don't need to do any calculation at all, because as you can see, dataset y is just dataset x and a 27. Intuitively, we know that the average of dataset y is going to be greater than dataset x, because, well, 27 is greater than every single number in dataset y. Looking at the answer choices, we see that it's not going to be D, because we do have enough information. It's not going to be C, because dataset x and y are not equal, which means their averages won't be equal. Looking at A, it's going to be wrong because it's saying the exact opposite, that it's greater. Therefore, the answer is B. And we can see that B is correct because it says that dataset x is less than the mean of dataset y. Problem 3. Right triangles PQR and STU are similar, where P corresponds to S. If the measure of angle Q is 18 degrees, what is the measure of angle S? So the measure of angle Q is 18. We know that angle R is 90, and so is angle U. So to find angle S, we need to know angle P, because in similar triangles, we know that the angles preserve. The angles basically stay the same to their corresponding angle. So how do we find P? Well, we know that in a triangle, all the angle sums up to 180, which means 90 plus 18 plus angle P must be equal to 180. And doing the algebra, right, we get that angle P is equal to 72. So P is equal to 72. Now, remember what I said earlier, that similar triangles have their angles preserved. That means that T is also 18, and S is also 72 degrees, giving us B, 72. Problem 4. A rocket contained 467,000 kilograms of propellant before launch. Exactly 21 seconds after launch, 362,105 kilograms of this propellant remained. On average, approximately how much propellant in kilograms did the rocket burn each second after launch? So, in this question, we're trying to find an average, which tells us that I'm going to have to divide things, right? And we're trying to find, on average, how much propellant the rocket burned each second after launch. And how many seconds after launch? 21 seconds after launch. So we're going to have to divide something by 21. Now, we know that 467,000 was the starting amount of propellant. And after 21 seconds, there were 362,105 kilograms left. And so this expression is going to be the answer. Now, obviously, on the real test, you would use a calculator for this, but since I'm not going to use a calculator in this video, I would just do it by hand. As a result, we get 4,995, which gives us A. Problem 5. The solution to the given system of equations is xy. What is the value of x plus y? The first thing that you should notice when you see this question is this simple equation right here. 4x equals 20. Dividing both sides by 4 gets us x equals 5. Good, we're already halfway there. Now substitute back in x equals 5 into the second equation. Adding 15 on both sides would give us y equals 8. Now we're going to add them both and get 13, which would give us C. Problem 6. A certain apprentice has enrolled in 85 hours of training courses. The equation 10x plus 15y equals 85 represents the situation, where x is the number of on-site training courses and y is the number of online training courses this apprentice has enrolled in. How many more hours does each online training course take than each on-site training course? Well, first of all, this question isn't as scary as it seems. The reason this question is so big on my screen is because I do not need space to calculate. Since x is the number of on-site training courses, if x equals 1, this term becomes 10. So we know that when we have one on-site training course, it's going to take 10 hours. Similarly, for y equals 1, when we have one online training course, this term becomes 15. Which means that for each online training course, it's going to take 15 hours. Now, all we have to do now is subtract these two numbers to get 5. Problem 7. Square x has a side length of 12 centimeters. The perimeter of square y is 2 times the perimeter of square x. What is the length in centimeters of one side of square y? So first of all, square x has a side length of 12 centimeters. And square y has a perimeter that is 2 times the perimeter of square x. So what is the perimeter of square x? Well, the perimeter is just all the side lengths added up. So that would be 12 plus 12 plus 12 plus 12, which is 48. Since the perimeter of square y is 2 times the perimeter of square x, we know that the perimeter of square y is going to be 96. Since 48 times 2 is 96. Now, it's asking for one side of square y. And how do we find that? Well, in a square, all the sides are the same. Therefore, we just need to divide it by 4. Dividing by 4, we get 24, which is D. Problem 8. The given function g models the number of gallons of gasoline that remains from a full gas tank in a car after driving m miles. According to the model, about how many gallons of gasoline are used to drive each mile? So we know that m is the number of miles, and we're trying to find how many gallons of gasoline are used to drive each mile. And each basically means 1. So if m is 1, this term becomes negative 0.05, which tells us that the car uses 0.05 gallons per mile. So it's A. Problem 9. If the absolute value of 4x minus 4 is 112, what is the positive value of x minus 1? Okay, so what is an absolute value? Say we have an integer x, and we're taking the absolute value of it. Essentially, what we're saying is that what is the distance between x and 0 on a number line? Let me demonstrate. Say x equals -3. Here's the number line. We see that this is x, and this is 0. Well, what is the distance between them? The distance between these two numbers is 3, because we have 1, 2, and 3. Therefore, the absolute value of x is 3. Now, back to the problem. We're trying to find the absolute value of 4x minus 4. If the absolute value of 4x minus 4 equals 112, what are the possible values that 4x minus 4 could be? We know that the distance between 4x minus 4 and 0 on a number line is 112. 4x minus 4 could either be on the left side of the number line, or 4x minus 4 could be on the right side of the number line, with 0 in the middle. If 4x minus 4 is in the left side of the number line, it's going to be negative. If it's on the right, it's going to be positive. We know that there are two values that 4x minus 4 could be. And those are 4x minus 4 equals 112, or 4x minus 4 equals negative 112. Now, how do we know which one it is? Well, looking back at the question, we see that we're trying to find the positive value of x minus 1. If we multiply x minus 1 by 4, we get 4x minus 4, which is just our value that we're trying to solve. And looking back at two of our options, we see that the positive value of this is 112. Now remember, the final answer is not 112 because we multiply x minus 1 by 4. To get x minus 1, we have to divide it back by 4. Dividing it by 4, we get 28, which is our final answer. Problem 10. The given equation relates to positive numbers b, x, and y. Which equation correctly expresses x in terms of b and y? So what we're trying to do here is essentially to isolate x. What's the first thing that we can do? Well, looking back at the equation, we can just multiply both sides by y to get rid of the denominator. Doing so will result in y over 7b equals 11x. Now we should divide both sides by 11. Which would give us y over 7b all over 11 equals x. But this is not our final answer, because we need to simplify this complex fraction. And how do we solve this? Well, we use keep change flip. So we're going to keep y over 7b. We're going to change the division to multiplication. And then we're going to flip 11 over 1 to 1 over 11. Doing the math, this would give us y over 77b, which is C. Problem 11. The table shows 4 values of x and their corresponding values of f of x. There is a linear relationship between x and f of x that is defined by the equation f of x equals mx minus 28, where m is a constant. What is the value of m? So first of all, we're given an equation with f of x and x, and we're given a chart involving x and f of x. So I'm going to pick one pair and substitute it back into the equation, which gives us 82 equals 10m minus 28. Now we can just solve for m by adding 28 on both sides first. That gives us 110 equals 10m. Dividing both sides by 10 gives us m equals 11, which is our final answer. Problem 12. The given expression is equivalent to bx cubed minus 11, where b is a constant. What is the value of b? So our goal here is to rewrite this expression in terms of bx cubed minus 11. So what's the first thing we should do? The first thing we should do is distribute this -1 into these two terms. Which would get us this new expression. Now, we can just combine like terms to get 9x cubed equals 11, which is equal to bx cubed minus 11. Now, by comparison, we see that b is equal to 9. Therefore, the answer is 9. Problem 13. The point x, 53 is a solution to the system of inequalities in the xy plane. Which of the following could be the value of x? Now, since y is 53, we know that this statement is always going to be true. So we could actually just ignore it. And now replacing y as 53 in the second equation would give us this new equation. Subtracting both sides by 53 would give us 4x is less than -35. Now, from here, we can just plug in our answer choices. So, let's check A. If x is -9, this would be our new expression. And since -35 is greater than -36, A is the correct answer. Problem 14. Bacteria are growing in a liquid growth medium. There were 300,000 cells per milliliter during an initial observation. The number of cells per milliliter doubles every 3 hours. How many cells per milliliter will there be 15 hours after the initial observation? Firstly, how many 3 hours are there in 15 hours? Well, 15 divided by 3 equals 5. And since the number of cells per milliliter is going to double every 3 hours, and there are 5 3 hours in 15 hours, it's going to double 5 times. Writing this in an expression would be 300,000 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. This can be rewritten as 300,000 times 2 to the 5th power. And what's 2 to the 5th power? That's 32. Doing the algebra, we can see that it's going to be 9.6 million, which is D. Problem 15. The graph gives the estimated number of catalogs, Y, in thousands a company sent to its customers at the end of each year, where X represents the number of years since the end of 1992, where X is between 0 and 10 inclusive. Which statement is the best interpretation of the y-intercept in this context? The y-intercept is going to be this. Now, what do we know about y? We know that y is the number of catalogs in thousands, which means this 9 stands for 9,000. With this information, we can already eliminate C because it says 9. We can eliminate B because it says 90. Looking at A, it says that the estimated total number of catalogs the company sent to its customers during the first 10 years was 9,000. This is wrong because years is in X. When Y is 9,000, what is X? X is 0. That means year equals 0. Year is not 10, it's 0. And what does it mean if year is 0? Well, we know that X represents the number of years since the end of 1992, which means if X is 0, the year is just 1992, or rather the end of 1992, which gives us D. At the end of 1992, there were 9,000 catalogs a company sent. Problem 16. Which expression is equivalent to the seventh root of x to the ninth power times y to the ninth power, where x and y are positive? So, what does it mean for nth root of x to the m? Well, this can be rewritten exponentially as x to the m over n. For example, the square root of x is equal to x to the 1/2, because in this case m equals 1 and n equals 2. The cube root of x can be rewritten as x to the 1/3, because m equals 1 and n equals 3, according to our formula. Now, how can we rewrite this expression in terms of exponents? For our first step, we will rewrite x to the ninth power times y to the ninth power. We can rewrite this as x times y all to the ninth power, because remember, ab to the nth power is equal to a to the nth power times b to the nth power. Applying this rule would give us the seventh root of xy to the ninth. Turning this into an exponent, remember what I said earlier about the rule, would give us xy all to the 9 over 7th power. And looking at our answer choices, would give us B. Problem 17. The population of City A increased by 7% from 2015 to 2016. If the 2016 population is k times the 2015 population, what is the value of k? Imagine City A has 100 people in 2015. If the population grows by 7%, how many people do we add? It will be 107. So in 2016, we have 107 people. Now, the question asks for k, which is just the number you multiply the old population by to get the new one. If you multiply 100 by 1, you still have 100. This is a 0% growth, or an increase by 0%. To get to 107, you have to multiply that original 100% by itself plus the extra 7%. Since multiplying by itself is just multiplying by 1, we would have 1. However, we still have to plus that extra 7%. In decimals, 100% is 1, and 7% is 0.07. Therefore, we would have to add 0.07. When you put them together, you get 1.07. And this number is k. And this expression would evaluate to 107. Therefore, our answer is C. Problem 18. Which of the following systems of linear equations has no solution? For a system of linear equations to have no solutions on a graph, right? If it has a solution, it means that there's an intersection. However, in this case, there is no solution, which means there is no intersection. How can we graphically represent that? An example would be these two dotted lines, where they extend infinitely on both directions, but they never touch. How do we know, based on the equations, if the two lines never touch? That would be the slope. The slope is rise over run. If the rise over run of the two equations is the same, that means they will never touch, because their steepness is going to be the same. Every linear equation is in the form y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope. So our condition is to make m the same. B doesn't matter, as it's just the y-intercept. Looking back at the answer choices, we immediately see that C has the same slope because m equals 16. Now it doesn't matter that B is 3 and 19 because as long as the slope is the same, their steepness is going to be the same, which means they'll never touch on a graph. Therefore the answer is C. Problem 18. Which of the following systems of linear equations has no solution? For a system of linear equations to have no solutions, on a graph, right? If it has a solution, it means that there's an intersection. However, in this case, there is no solution, which means there is no intersection. How can we graphically represent that? An example would be these two dotted lines, where they extend infinitely on both directions, but they never touch. How do we know? Based on the equations, if the two lines never touch? That would be the slope. The slope is rise over run. If the rise over run of the two equations is the same, that means they will never touch, because their steepness is going to be the same. Now, every linear equation is in the form y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope. So our condition is to make m the same. B doesn't matter, as it's just the y-intercept. Looking back at the answer choices, we immediately see that C has the same slope because m equals 16. Therefore, the answer is C. Problem 19. The first term of a sequence is 9. Each term after the first is 4 times the preceding term. If W represents the nth term of a sequence, which equation gives W in terms of n? So this problem might seem confusing at first, but for example, if n equals 1, that means it's the first term of the sequence. W would be the first term of the sequence. If n equals 2, W would be the second term of the sequence, and so on. Now, since we already know the first term of a sequence is 9, if n equals 1, W equals 9. So we can plug and check first with our answer choices. If n equals 1 for answer choice A, W would equal 36, which is certainly not 9. If n equals 1 in answer choice B, W would be 4, because remember, anything except 0 to the 0th power is just 1. Therefore, B is wrong. For C, we see that if n equals 1, W would equal 36. Same thing as A. Therefore, C is wrong. For D, if n equals 1, we get W equals 9. Therefore, our answer is D. Problem 20. The minimum value of x is 12 less than 6 times another number n, which inequality shows the possible values of x? So let's first translate 12 less than 6 times another number n. Firstly, it's going to be 6 times another number n. Because it's 12 less than that, we have to subtract 12. From this, we can already eliminate c and d. Now, for our next step, we have to use the correct inequality to show that the minimum value of x is this. What do we mean by the minimum value of x is 6n minus 12? That means x has to be at least this number. That means x can be 6n minus 11, 6n minus 10, or even 6n, since all of these are greater than 6n minus 12. Looking back at our answer choices, we see that it's not going to be A, because A is saying that the maximum value of x is 6n minus 12, since it's showing that x can be less than it. We're going to choose B, because it's correctly demonstrating our example. Problem 21. The side lengths of right triangle RST are given. Triangle RST is similar to triangle UVW, where S corresponds to V and T corresponds to W. What is the value of tangent W? We're going to draw these two right triangles first. Drawing these two triangles out, we get these. Since we're trying to find tangent of W, we need to know tangent of T, since, as we saw in a previous question, in similar triangles, the angles preserve. Therefore, angle T will be the same as angle W. So, what is tangent T? Well, remember from SOHCAHTOA, right? Tangent is opposite over adjacent. The opposite of T is 20. The adjacent of T is 48. Therefore, tangent of T is 20 over 48, which can be simplified to 5 over 12. Therefore, since tangent W is equal to tangent T, the answer is B. Problem 22. The graph of 9x minus 10y equals 19 is translated down 4 units in the xy plane. What is the x-coordinate of the x-intercept of the resulting graph? First of all, let's rewrite this equation into the form y equals mx plus b. As a result, we get y equals 9 over 10x minus 19 over 10. Now, if you had access to a calculator, you could just plug this into Desmos and subtract 4 from it, since we're translating down by 4. But I'm going to do this by hand to show you that it's pretty easy. To show that it translates down by 4, we just have to subtract this equation by 4. Which would get us y equals 9 over 10x minus 59 over 10. We're trying to find the x-coordinate of the x-intercept of the resulting graph. So first of all, we have to find the x-intercept. What is the x-intercept? The x-intercept is in the form x, 0, where x is the x-intercept and y is 0. So to find x, we'll just set y equals 0, which would get us this. multiplying both sides by 10, adding both sides by 59, finally dividing both sides by 9. This is our final answer, 59 over 9. Congrats. Thank you for watching today's SAT practice test video. In our next SAT practice test video, I'll be doing part 2 of the same test, which is going to cover the harder module